Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. In the last week, we started our discussion related to what is a programming language and what is framework. Programming language used by humans to communicate with the computers, and programming languages contains set of instructions and syntaxes. So there are so many programming languages are available. By using those programming languages, we are communicating with the computers to perform some operation, right? Java, C++, C#, Python, these all are programming languages. Now whereas currently in the market we are using frameworks also along with the programming language. We are using frameworks also to develop our applications. So here, what is a framework? Framework means it is a semi-developed software. The frameworks provides some common logics which are required for application development. Now, if you go for any application, some logics will be very common. If you go for any application, some logics are very common. So what are the common logics that are required for every application? Now you see, so many companies are developing the applications. In the all the applications, some common logics will be available, like database communication, object creation, form validations, form data capturing, email sending, security. These are common logics. Now if you are working on several projects, then in several places you need to write the same common logics. In several places you need to write the same common logics. That is becoming boilerplate code. So to overcome the common logics in all the projects, so frameworks came into market. Now whatever the common logics are required for the projects, those logics will be available in the framework, and you can use that framework in your project. So you can use that framework in your project. When you use the framework in your project, framework will provide you the common logics, and you concentrate only on your business logic, so that application development will be faster. Quickly you can develop your application because you need to concentrate only on the business logic, and repeated logic or boilerplate common logic will be taken care by framework. So what is a framework? Framework means it is a semi-developed software. Frameworks provides some common logics which are required for application development. So there are several frameworks available in the market like Hibernate, Struts, Spring, etc. So there are several frameworks available in the Java community. So now if we use framework in our application development, then we need to focus only on business logic, and frameworks will provide common logics required for our application. Framework will provide the logics, common logics. So like database communications, database communication related logic, object creations required for our classes, forms development, forms validations, form data capturing, email sending, security. These are common logics. Those common logics will be taken care by framework, and we need to concentrate only on the business logic. All right. So there are several frameworks available, like a Hibernate framework is available, Struts framework is available, and the Spring framework is available. Hibernate is an ORM framework. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. By using this Hibernate framework, we can develop only persistence layer of our application. By using Hibernate framework, what we can do? We can develop only persistence layer of our application. Persistence layer nothing but the logic which is responsible to communicate with the database is called as persistence layer. Only we can communicate with the database by using Hibernate framework. Can I develop entire project by using Hibernate, or I cannot develop entire project by using Hibernate? Guys, can you tell me, can we develop the entire project by using Hibernate, or we cannot develop the entire project by using Hibernate? We cannot develop the entire project by using Hibernate. Now later we have seen Struts framework. What is Struts? What is struts? Guys, can you tell me what is a struts framework? Struts is a web framework. Struts is a web framework. We can develop only web layer in the struts framework. We can develop only web layer in the struts framework, like dealing with request and response. That logic will be available in the web layer. So can I develop a project by using only struts? No. So we need to use the combination of struts and spring, then only we can develop one project. We need to use the combination of struts and hibernate, then only we can develop the project. Later point of time, people started thinking like this: array, if we want to develop one Java application, for web layer we are using one framework called struts framework. Okay, now for business layer we are using some JEE concepts, and for persistence layer we are using hibernate framework. So people want to develop a project by using MVC architecture. Presentation layer will be available, web layer will be available, business layer will be available, persistence layer is available. Now people need to focus on multiple things here. They need to develop a presentation layer, they need to develop a web layer, they need to develop a business layer, they need to develop a persistence layer. Okay, now people started thinking like this: why can't we provide everything in one framework? Why can't we provide everything in one framework? So people are going for hibernate for persistence layer development, people are going for struts for web layer development. Why can't we provide a single framework which will address all the issues of the application development? That's where spring framework came into market. That's where spring framework into came into market. What is this spring? Spring is an application development framework. By using this spring framework, entire project can be developed. Whatever the layers are available in your application, all the layers development can be done by using spring framework. So now we can do end-to-end application by using spring framework. That's why spring is called as application development framework. Hibernate is called as ORM framework. Struts is called as web framework, whereas Spring is called as application development framework. By using Hibernate, you can develop only persistence layer for your project. That's why it is called as only ORM framework. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. Coming to Struts framework. Struts framework is called as web framework. By using Struts framework, we can develop only web layer. You can develop only web layer. Okay. Now here, if you want to develop a project, you need to take the Struts framework, you need to take the Hibernate framework, and you need to integrate the Struts framework and Hibernate framework. Now guys, a simple example. Now you are a working employee. You are a working employee. You got married. You got married. Now you want to weekend. You want to go for shopping. Weekend you want to go for shopping, and you want to go for restaurant, and you want to go for a movie. Simple example. Let's take you and your wife want to go for shopping over a weekend, and you want to do some shopping. You want to go for a restaurant for lunch, and you want to go for a movie. Now, will you prefer going for a shopping mall, go to movie separately, go to restaurant separately, go to shopping separately, or if you go to a shopping mall like Inorbit Mall, GVK Mall, AMB Mall in Hyderabad, can you do everything at one place? Shopping, lunch, movie? Yes or no? So earlier, people used to go for shopping separately. This is a separate area. In one area, shopping is available. In one area, movie theater is available. In one area, restaurant is available. Let's assume that. Now, this shopping mall is available in high tech city. Shopping mall is available in high tech city. Movie theater is available in Jubilee Hills. Movie theater available in Jubilee Hills. Your favorite restaurant is available in Kondapur, in Hyderabad, 3 areas. So what is the problem if you go for 3 areas like this? Time waste or not? It is a time waste or not? Lunch here, movie here, shopping here, shopping here. So what is the problem here? So lunch you want to go for one restaurant in the Kondapur. So you want to go for Absolute Barbecue, AB's Absolute Barbecue. You want to go for a lunch that is in the Kondapur, and you want to watch a movie. The movie theater is available in the Jubilee Hills. Movie theater available in the Jubilee Hills, and you want to do a shopping. That shop is available in High Tech City. So three different places you have to visit. Three different places you have to visit. Instead of this, if you go to AMB Mall, if you go to AMB Mall, if you go to AMB Mall in Gachibowli, now in the AMB Mall, shopping can be, you can do the shopping, you can do the lunch also in the AMB, you can do watch the movie also in the AMB. So in one place, can you complete all the three things now? In one place, can you complete all the three things now? Yes or no? Nowadays, people will prefer which one? People will prefer which one? Will they prefer this approach or they prefer this approach? Mall approach they are going to prefer, 3 in 1. You can do the shopping there, you can do the lunch, and you can watch movie also. Your weekend will be completed, you can come back to your home. Right. Similarly, in order to develop the applications also, for web layer development, one framework available. For persistence layer development, one framework available. Array, instead of taking the two frameworks separately and integrating in the project development, why can't we take a single project which will provide everything for the project development? That's where Spring framework came into market. So now developing a project with struts and Hibernate like this, persistence with the Hibernate, web layer with struts. If you go for Spring framework, that means everything is available at one place only. By using Spring, you can develop the presentation layer, you can develop the web layer, you can develop the business layer, and you can develop the persistence layer also. It is all in one, all in one. Whatever is required for your project development, everything can be done by using Spring. That's why Spring is called as application development framework. End-to-end project can be developed by using Spring framework. Are you guys able to understand my point? The difference between Hibernate, Spring, and Struts? Yes. Now, now let's talk about what are the advantages of going for Spring framework. What are the advantages of going for Spring framework? It is an, it is a free, it is a free and open source framework. It is a free and open source framework. That means you no need to purchase the Spring framework to develop the application with the Spring. Spring framework is free of cost and the source code of the Spring is also available. You can use the Spring software for free of cost. Spring is free and open source framework. Spring is free and open source framework. Next one, Spring is very Spring is very lightweight framework. Spring is very lightweight framework. So the total size of the Spring framework is almost around 2 MB only. So now if you download the Spring and if you use the Spring framework in the project, there is no problem because Spring is very lightweight framework. Spring is very lightweight framework. Now next one, Spring is versatile framework. Spring is versatile framework. Guys, can you tell me what is versatility? Basic English, what is versatile? What is versatile? Any idea? Adjustable. Versatility nothing but what? Adjustable. Adjustable. Now, what is the meaning of that versatility? What is the meaning of that versatility? Versatility nothing but adjustable. Easily it can mingle with anything. Now, my project is developed by using My project is developed by using struts and Hibernate or servlets and JSP. My project is developed by using servlets and JSP. My project is developed by using servlets and JSP. Existing project, it is developed, half of the project is developed by using servlets and JSP. Now, can I use Spring in the servlets and JSP project? Can I integrate Spring framework with the servlets project? Aram say you can integrate because Spring is a versatile framework. Spring framework can be integrated with servlets and JSP project also. Hey Ashok, my project almost 50% project is completed by using Struts framework and Hibernate framework. 50% of the project is completed by using Struts framework and Hibernate framework. Can I integrate Spring framework? Can I integrate Spring framework with my Struts framework and Hibernate framework based project? Aram say you can integrate with that. You can integrate with that. So Spring can be integrated with any other framework available in the Java. That is called versatility. Spring can be integrated with any other Java framework available in the market. Any other Java framework available in the market. That is called versatility. Spring framework is called as versatile framework. The reason that we are calling as versatile because Spring framework can be integrated with any other Java framework available in the market. So that is called as versatile. And the next one is Spring is non-invasive framework. Spring is non-invasive framework. What is the meaning of non-invasive framework? What is the meaning of non-invasive framework? Let's understand what is that non-invasiveness. Guys, now I want to develop one servlet. Can you tell me how to develop a servlet class? Simple. I want to develop one servlet. Can you guys tell me how to develop a servlet? Can you guys tell me how to develop a servlet? Please. How to develop a servlet? Huh. Class welcome servlet. Class welcome servlet extends HTTP servlet. Class welcome servlet extends HTTP servlet or generic servlet. Then once you extend the properties from this servlet, then you are going to override some methods like do get method is available, do post method is available. Do get method is available and do post methods are available in the HTTP servlet. We are going to override those methods. Okay. Now, can I compile this servlet class by using only JDK software? Can I compile this servlet by using only JDK software? I need the servlet jar file to compile this class. Can I compile this class by using only JDK, or I need the servlet jar file to compile this Java class? Servlet jar file is required to compile the Java class. That means my Java class is tightly coupled with servlet API. My Java class is tightly coupled with servlet API. Without having the servlet API jar file in the build path, I cannot compile this. I cannot compile this. Are you clear with my point? Now, can you create a servlet class without extending from HTTP servlet or generic servlet or without implementing servlet interface? Can you create a servlet class without implementing servlet interface, without extending generic servlet, without extending HTTP servlet? Can you create a servlet in the Java? Is it possible? It is not possible. That means servlets, servlets technology is forcing the programmers to use servlet interface or servlet classes. that is tightly coupled. They are forcing you to use technology specific interfaces and classes. Either you have to implement a servlet interface or you need to extend the properties from generic servlet or HTTP servlet. Whereas when you go for Spring Framework, when you go for Spring Framework, you just create a class as motor. You just create a class with a name called some motor class and you write some methods in this class. Now, this is a simple Pojo class. Spring Framework is going to execute your class. Spring will not force you to extend or implement anything related to Spring Framework. You can develop your projects by using only Pojo classes. You can develop your classes by using only Pojo classes. Spring is going to manage your classes. Spring is going to manage your classes. When you go for the servlets, they are forcing you to extend the properties or implement the servlet interface. Whereas Spring framework is not going to force you. It does not. Spring will not force. Spring will not force to use any framework related classes or interfaces. Spring framework will not force us to use framework related interfaces or classes. It is non-invasive. Simple example, simple example. To create a servlet, to create a servlet, we need to implement, we need to implement servlet interface or we need to extend HTTP servlet or generic servlet. We need to extend HTTP servlet or generic servlet. In Spring, we can create a simple Pojo. Then Spring will execute our Pojo classes. Spring is working based on Pojo and Poji model. Spring is working on Spring is working based on Pojo and Poji model. So Spring framework is a non-invasive framework. What is the meaning of non-invasive? Spring framework will not force us to use framework related interfaces or classes. If you go for servlets is invasive. Servlets is invasive. If you want to develop a servlet in the project, you need to implement a servlet interface or we need to extend HTTP servlet or generic servlet. That means that means servlet is forcing us to use servlets specific interfaces or classes. Servlets specific interfaces or classes. In Spring, we can create a simple Pojo. Then we can ask Spring to execute our Pojo. We can create a simple Pojo and we can ask Spring to execute our Pojo. Execute our Pojo. Spring will do that. Spring works based on Pojo and Poji model. Pojo and Poji. Pojo stands for plain old Java object. Poji stands for plain old Java interface. I will explain what is a Pojo, what is a Java bean, what is a component. I will come to those classes. For time being, Spring is in free and open source framework. Let's understand that for time being, Spring is a free and open source framework. Spring is very lightweight framework. Spring is versatile framework. Versatility nothing but easily integrated, easily it can mingle with others. Spring framework can be integrated with any other Java framework available in the market. Spring is non-invasive. What is the meaning of non-invasive? Spring framework will not force us to use framework related interfaces or classes like servlets. Servlet is forcing. If you want to create a servlet, you need to implement the interface or you need to extend the properties from a generic servlet or HTTP servlet. Then only your class will be considered as a servlet. Otherwise, your class is a normal Java class only. But in the Spring, it is not like that. Spring is non-invasive framework. Spring will not force you anything. Spring will not force you to use anything from the framework, either framework interfaces or framework classes. You can develop your classes with the POJO and POJI model. POJO stands for plain old Java object. POJI, plain old Java interface. So Spring framework is going to work based on POJO and POJI model. So what is POJO? What is POJI? How to create them? We are going to understand those things in the coming classes. POJO stands for plain old Java object. POJI stands for plain old Java interface. Plain old Java interface. POJO and POJI. POJO means a simple Java class which can be compiled by using only JDK, guys. A class which is very simple and that can be compiled by using only Java, only by using JDK software without any dependency, without any jar file. If you can compile your Java class, then it is called as a POJO class. That means a class which is loosely coupled. Now, you don't need anything to compile this class. If you have just JDK software, then you can compile your POJO. POJO means plain old Java object. POJO means plain old Java object. POJI means plain old Java interface. POJI means plain old Java interface. So now do you understand what is versatile and what is non-invasive? Able to understand what is versatile and what is non-invasive? Yes. Now, Spring framework is developed in modular fashion. Spring is not a single framework. Spring is not a single framework. It is collection of it is a collection of modules. It is collection of modules. Spring is loosely coupled and Spring is not a single framework. Spring framework is nothing but collection of modules. So there are several modules are available in the Spring framework. There are several modules are available in the Spring framework. Guys, can you tell me what are the modules what are the names of what are the module names that you know in the Spring? Can anyone tell me any modules that you know in the Spring framework? Spring is not a single framework. Spring is not a single framework. Spring framework is developed in modules in modular fashion. There are several modules available in Spring framework. Can anyone tell me the modules in the Spring? Everybody should respond. Don't sleep in the class, guys. Respond and tell me the answer. And tell me the answer. Tell me the answer. So there are several modules are available in Spring framework. Now, Spring modules. So there are several modules available in the Spring framework. Spring framework is developed in modular fashion. Spring framework is developed in modular fashion. So that is first one is a Spring core. First one is a Spring core module. Second one is a Spring context module, Spring core, Spring Context, Spring DAO, Spring DAO, Spring AOP, Spring AOP, then Spring ORM, Spring ORM, then Spring WebMVC, Spring Core, Spring Context, Spring DAO, Spring AOP, Spring ORM, Spring WebMVC, Spring WebMVC. Then next one, Spring Security, Spring Security, Spring REST, Spring REST, Spring Data, Spring Data, etc. Spring Cloud, Spring Data, Spring Cloud, Spring Batch, Spring Cloud, Spring Batch, Spring JDBC, nothing but Spring DAO. Spring DAO, nothing but Spring JDBC. Like that, there are several modules available in Spring Framework. There are several modules available in Spring Framework. Spring is not a single framework. Spring is collection of frameworks, or we can say Spring is collection of modules. So there are several modules are available in Spring Framework. Sir, do we need to learn all these modules? Do we need to use all the modules in the project? Can you tell me? Spring Framework is developed in modular fashion. There are several modules are available in the Spring Framework. The beauty of the Spring is, the beauty of the Spring is here there are so many modules available in the Spring Framework, but Spring is not forcing you to use or not forcing to learn all the modules in the Spring. For your project, based on the requirement, you can choose the modules from the Spring and you can use whatever is required. You no need to learn all the modules. You no need to use all the modules. Whatever the module is required for the project, we can pick up that module and we can use it. Spring Framework is loosely coupled. It will not force you to use all the modules also. Do you want to develop a web application? Then take only WebMVC module and use it. For your project, you just want to add the security. You have already Java project. For your Java project, you want to add only security. Then take only the security module and do it. For your project, do you want to develop persistence layer? Then go for DAO or JDBC. If you want ORM benefits, then go for Spring ORM module. Do you want to implement some cross-cutting logics like security, transactions, emails, transactions, logging, auditing and all? Then go for AOP module. Okay. So do you want to implement a batch processing in the project? Then go for Spring Batch module. Do you want to develop REST API in your project? Then go for Spring REST. Spring REST. Do you want to deal with some cloud concepts for microservices architecture? Then go for Spring Cloud module. All right. So do you want to take care of the configurations? Then go for Spring Context module. So like that, there are several modules are available in our application. Spring Framework is developed by using modules. Spring Framework is developed by using modules. Spring modules are available. All right. Okay. Now here, first one, Spring is not a single framework. Spring Framework is developed in modular fashion. Spring is not a Spring is not a single framework. Spring is developed in modular fashion. There are several modules available for the Spring Framework. Now here, Spring Framework is loosely coupled. Spring Framework, Spring Framework is loosely coupled. It will not force to use. It will not force to use all modules. It will not force you to use all the modules. Okay. Based on the requirement, based on project requirement, based on project requirement, we can choose which modules we need to use. Which modules we need to use from Spring. So it is loosely coupled framework. It is loosely coupled framework and it is developed in modular fashion. Spring is loosely coupled framework and it is developed in modular fashion. It is not going to force you to use all the modules of the Spring also. Whatever the module is required for you, you can pick up only that module and you can do that. You can do that. Okay, guys. Could you please read the module names? Could you please read the module names? Guys, completed? Right. Next one here. What is the purpose of Spring Core module? Spring Core module is the fundamental module or base module is the Spring framework. Now, if you want to learn any module in the Spring, first you need to learn the Spring Core module. Are you guys getting my point? Sir, can I learn directly Spring Web MVC? No, you need to learn the Spring Core. Spring Core is the base module for all the other modules in the Spring framework. If you want to learn any module, first you need to be strong in the Spring Core. You need to be strong in the Spring Core. Spring Core module is the fundamental module in the Spring and it is the base module for all the other modules. Now, Spring Core is the base module for all other modules in Spring. All other modules in Spring. Spring Core is the base module for all other modules in the Spring framework. To work with any module in the Spring, first we should know Spring Core. To work with any module in Spring, first we need to know Spring Core module, because Spring Core module is base module of all the other modules in the Spring framework. Without knowing Spring Core module, you cannot learn or you cannot use any other module in the Spring. Spring Core is the base module and Spring Core is the fundamental module in the Spring framework. Spring Core is the base module for all other modules in Spring. To work with any module in Spring, first we need to know Spring Core module. Spring Core module is providing fundamental concepts of the Spring framework, those are called as IOC container and dependency injection. Spring Core is all about IOC container and dependency injection. In this course, we are going to understand Spring Core also. You don't need to worry about it. We are going to learn Spring Core module also. Got my point, guys? Spring Core, Spring Core is the base module. Spring Core is base module in Spring framework. Spring Core module is the base module in the Spring framework. Spring Core module is base module in Spring framework. Spring framework. It is providing IOC container and dependency injection. IOC and DI are fundamental concepts of the Spring framework. IOC and DI are fundamental concepts of Spring. Without IOC and DI, there is no use of going for the Spring. IOC and DI are fundamental concepts of Spring framework. Why Spring framework is this much famous in the market? Because of this IOC container and dependency injection. What is that IOC and DI? We will come to know in the coming classes. Almost it will take 1 week of time to understand only this IOC container and dependency injection. IOC and DI are fundamental concepts of the Spring. That IOC and DI part of Spring Core module. Spring Core module is base module in the Spring framework. It is providing IOC and DI. Without Spring Core knowledge, you cannot use any other module in the Spring. That is the base module. That is the base module. Now, Spring context module will deal with Spring context module will deal with configurational related stuff, configuration related stuff. Any configurations that are required for our applications, those configurations will be part of Spring context module. Those things will be related to context. Configurations related to be configurations of the project will be related to configurations related stuff will be taken care by Spring context module. Spring AOP. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. Spring AOP is used to deal with cross-cutting logics in our application. Cross-cutting logics, nothing but common logics in our project, like logging we have to implement, exception handling we have to implement, logging, exception handling, security, transactions, auditing. Instead of writing that in every class, we are going to separate business logic plus cross-cutting logic. Application is equal to business logic plus cross-cutting logics. Application nothing but business logic plus cross-cutting logics. Now, cross-cutting logics nothing but common logics. So security, transaction, auditing, exception handling, which are very common in our application. Those things can be separated. Spring Core module is the base module in the Spring. It is providing IOC container and dependency injection. IOC and DI are fundamental concepts of the Spring framework. Spring context module will deal with the configuration related stuff. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. Spring AOP is used to deal with cross-cutting logics in the application. Application means business logic plus cross-cutting logic. We can separate, we can separate, we can separate business logic, we can separate business logic and cross-cutting logic using AOP module. Using AOP module. Now, let us see here. I am writing some methods in my project. Assume that there is a M1 method and there is a M2 method and there is some M3 method in my project. Like that, there are several methods available in my application, like M1, M2 and M3. Like that, there are several methods available. In these methods, I'm writing business logic. I'm writing business logic in the methods. Okay. Along with the business logic, I want to write some transaction logic and I want to write some security logic. Okay. And here I want to do some logging. Here I want to do some logging. So in every method, I want to write a logic like this: transaction, security, business logic, and logging. In M2 also, in M3 also, like this, like this. Now, if I write a logic like this, then what is the problem here? What is the problem here? Here I have combined business logic plus cross-cutting logic. Cross-cutting logic, nothing but the logic which is a secondary logic or which is a supporting logic to execute our business logic, logging, security and all will come under cross-cutting logic. Okay, business logic plus cross-cutting logic is available in my application. Now I have combined business logic and cross-cutting logics in my methods. Like this, in my project, there are 10,000 methods are available. Guys, now, are you able to understand what is the problem with this approach? Are you able to understand what is the problem with this approach? Are you able to understand what is the problem with this approach? Code is repeating, duplicate code is available, code is repeating, and tomorrow I want to change something in the security. In how many places I need to change? I have 10,000 methods in my application. I have 10,000 methods in my application. In 10,000 methods, I have implemented my business logic and I have implemented my cross-cutting logic. I have implemented my cross-cutting logics. Then tomorrow I want to make some change for security logic. Do I need to change that at one place or I need to change that logic in 10,000 places? In all the methods, we have to change it. So is it recommended approach to develop the project or it is not the recommended approach to develop the projects? Is it the recommended approach to develop the project or it is not the recommended approach to develop the project? It is not at all recommended. Then what we will do in our application is we are going to create the business logic here, business methods. We are going to create the business methods like M1, M2, M3. The business methods will be available here. Now here I'm going to create my M1 method. In my M1 method, I will write only business logic. I will create M1 method, business logic, M2 method, M1, M2, M3, these are methods. They will contain only business logic. They will contain only business logic. I will not write the cross-cutting logic, like nothing but cross-cutting, nothing but repeated logic. Now for cross-cutting logics here, I'm going to do separate logging, security, transaction, auditing. I will write these cross-cutting logics separately. I will write these cross-cutting logics separately. Wherever I need them, I will use it in my project. These all are my cross-cutting logics of the application. Now, this business logic and cross-cutting logic can be integrated. This business logic and cross-cutting logic can be integrated, and we are going to execute that integrated logic by using AOP. This business logic and cross-cutting logic. So this is called my business logic. This is called my business logic, and this is called my cross-cutting logic. Business logic and cross-cutting logic. So now, if I combine the business logic and cross-cutting logic, there is a maintenance problem. Tomorrow, if I want to make some change in my project, I need to change at multiple places. So to overcome that burden, I'm going to separate the business logic and cross-cutting logic, and development is done separately, but execution should be separate, or execution should be integrated execution. This business logic is available in one class, cross-cutting logic is available in one class. So I have done the development separately. Do I need to execute them separately, or I need to integrate them and I need to execute that? Execution should be separate or execution should be integrated? Classes are separate, but execution should be integrated execution. Execution should be integrated execution. Who is going to integrate the business logic and cross-cutting logic in our project now? That is AOP. What is that? AOP. Now, when we develop the business logic and cross-cutting logic separately, this business logic and cross-cutting logics will be integrated by using AOP, and AOP is going to execute that. AOP is going to execute that. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. By using this AOP, we can separate the business logic and cross-cutting logic in the development, and we can execute them together in the runtime. Now, understand what is the difference. Now, are you able to understand what is the AOP in the Spring framework and what is the advantage of going for AOP in the Spring framework? AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. What is this AOP, guys? AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. Aspect oriented programming. Why we are going for aspect oriented programming? What is the advantage of going for aspect oriented programming? What is the advantage of going for aspect oriented programming? We can separate our business logic and cross-cutting logics by using AOP module. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. Spring AOP is used to deal with cross-cutting, is used to deal with cross-cutting logics in our application. Business logic will be available, cross-cutting logic will be available. We can separate the business logic and cross-cutting logics using AOP module. If you see the diagram, you can understand this clearly. So there are two approaches to develop a project. You can write the business logic and cross-cutting logic together. Then tomorrow, if you want to make some change to business logic, or if you want to some change to cross-cutting logic, the whole project will be affected. So that's why it is not at all recommended to develop like this. It is not at all recommended to develop like this. Always it is a problem. So that's why we are going to write the business logic and cross-cutting logic separately, and they will be integrated by using AOP module. Next one, Spring DAO or Spring JDBC modules are used to develop persistence layer. Spring JDBC or Spring DAO, both are same. Spring JDBC or Spring DAO module used to develop persistence layer, used to develop persistence layer. That means I want to communicate with the database from my application. So you no need to load the driver, you no need to open the connection, you no need to close the connection. Everything will be taken care by Spring JDBC module. You just need to tell to the Spring JDBC which query you want to execute. Then Spring JDBC will be taking care of that connections and all. Connect drivers, connection, statement, everything will be taken care by Spring JDBC. You just need to focus on your application development. You just need to focus on your application development. Spring ORM, Spring ORM module is used to develop persistence layer with ORM features, object relational mapping. JDBC will represent the data as a text. ORM will represent the data as a object. Data will be represented in the form of objects, like how we have a Hibernate. Spring ORM will internally use the Hibernate framework only. Spring people don't want to develop everything from the scratch. Spring people integrated Hibernate framework in the ORM. If you are using Spring ORM, that means you are using Hibernate ORM. Hibernate ORM used to develop the persistence layer with ORM benefits or ORM features. Spring WebMVC module used to develop web applications using Spring framework. Spring WebMVC module is used to develop web applications. Now, I want to develop a web application by using Spring framework. Then you can go for WebMVC. Next one, Spring security. Spring security module is used for implementing security in our applications. Spring security module used to implement security features in our applications. Now I want to secure my application so that only authorized and authenticated and authorized people can access my project. Now we can implement authentication and authorization by using this security. Spring REST is used to develop REST APIs. Spring REST is used to develop RESTful services, or these are also called as REST API. Spring REST is used to develop RESTful services. We can say them as a REST API. Spring Data is used to develop persistence layer. Sir, JDBC already available to develop the persistence layer. After that, ORM is also available to develop the persistent layer. Then again, Spring Data is also available. Spring Data JPA. Here in the Spring Data JPA, it provided predefined repositories. To simplify CRUD operations. You no need to write the logic to perform the CRUD operations. There are predefined methods available. You can use those methods to perform CRUD operations for your application. Spring Data is used to develop. Persistence layer. It provided predefined repositories to simplify CRUD operations. You no need to write the logic also. The methods are ready-made. If you want to insert a record, you just call the method. You no need to implement it also. You just call the predefined methods, then data JPA. You just call that method, then data JPA is going to take care of that implementation. All good, guys? Spring Data is used to develop persistence layer. It provided predefined repositories to simplify CRUD operations. Now, Spring Cloud providing cloud concepts like service registry, cloud gateway, Fian client, Fian client, etc. So now when we are going to work with the microservices architecture, when we are going to work with microservices architecture, then we are going to use these cloud concepts like service registry, API gateway, cloud routing, cloud gateway, filters, routing, Fian client, etc. This kind of cloud concepts we can use in our application by using this Spring Cloud module. Next one, Spring Batch. Spring Batch is used to implement batch processing. Batch processing in our application. Batch processing means bulk operation. Batch processing means bulk operation. Batch processing means bulk operation. Now, sending an email for 10,000 people. Okay. Now, sending the salary to all the company employees, generating the bank statement and sending the bank statements to the customer email IDs. So any operation that you are going to do on the bulk of records, that is called as a batch process. We can implement that kind of a batch process by using Spring Batch module. So like that, there are several modules are available in Spring framework. Now, in order to learn these modules, can I directly learn Spring Batch, or can I directly learn Spring Security, Spring AOP, or I need to learn the Spring Core module first? Which one we need to learn first now? There are so many modules available in the Spring framework. Spring is a loosely coupled framework. There are several modules available. You no need to use all the modules also in one project. Whichever the module is required for you, you take only that module and you use that module in your project. Can I directly start with WebMVC? Sir, I want to develop a web application. So can you please start the WebMVC from tomorrow? Can you understand the WebMVC directly? No. Why Spring is most famous in the market? Because of loosely coupling, because of IOC container, because of dependency injection. So in which module we have IOC container and dependency injection concept? In which module we have that concept, guys? IOC container and dependency injection in the core module. So first, if you want to use the Spring framework, you need to know what is IOC container and what is dependency injection. IOC container and dependency injections are fundamental concepts of the Spring framework. Without IOC and DI, there is no Spring. So first we need to learn IOC container and dependency injection. They are part of core module. Core module is the base module of the Spring framework. So now we understood what are the advantages. What is the Spring framework? Today we discussed what is the Spring framework. Spring is an application development framework. The entire end-to-end application can be developed by using Spring framework. And we have seen advantages of going for Spring. So now it is a free and open source framework. It is lightweight framework. Spring is a versatile framework. Versatile means easily it can mingle with other frameworks also. It can be integrated with other frameworks easily. And the Spring framework is a non-invasive framework. Non-invasive means it will not force you anything. You can develop your Pojo and Spring is going to work with your Pojo's concept. In Spring, we can create a simple Pojo and we can ask the Spring to execute our Pojo. Spring is working based on Pojo and Poji model programming. Right? What is Pojo? We'll come to know in the coming classes. So Spring is a single framework, or Spring is a collection of modules. It is collection of modules. It is developed in modular fashion. So can you see what are the modules available in the Spring framework? Core module available, Spring core module available, context module available, DAO module available. DAO is also called as JDBC. Spring DAO module is also called as JDBC module, Spring AOP module, Spring ORM module, Spring WebMVC module, Spring Security, Spring REST, Spring Data, Spring Cloud, Spring Batch, Spring Social. Like that, there are so many modules are available in Spring. Spring Core is the base module for all the other modules. Now, As the Spring framework developed in modular fashion, these modules are loosely coupled. Spring is not forcing anybody to use all the modules. Whatever the module is suitable for your requirement, you take only that module and you use only that module in your project. Which module is suitable for your requirement, you take only that module and you use only that module for your project. Core is the base module. Core is the fundamental module. Core is very important module. Without knowledge, without having the knowledge on the core module, you cannot learn any other module in the Spring. Spring Core is the base module for all the other modules. In the core module, we have fundamental concepts like IOC container and dependency injection. Without IOC container and dependency injection, you cannot use the Spring framework. Next one is context module. Context module will deal with annotations that are related for Spring. Configuration support related to the Spring will be available in the context module. DAO and JDBC, data access object. By using that DAO and JDBC module in the Spring, we can develop persistence layer. Then Spring AOP. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. AOP stands for aspect oriented programming. Guys, can you please type in the chat what is the purpose of AOP? Can you please type in the chat box what is the purpose of AOP module in the Spring? What is the purpose of AOP module in the Spring? Come on. What is the purpose of AOP module in the Spring? AOP module is used to separate business logic and cross-cutting logics. AOP module is used to separate the business logic and cross-cutting logics. Can you tell me what is a cross-cutting logic? Can you tell me what is a cross-cutting logic? Common logics required for multiple methods like security, transaction, auditing, logging. The logics are called as cross-cutting logics. Is it recommended to combine business logic and cross-cutting logic? Is it recommended to combine business logic and cross-cutting logic, or it is not recommended to combine? It is not at all recommended to combine the business logic and cross-cutting logics. Not at all recommended to combine business logic and cross-cutting logics. All right. Next one, Spring ORM. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. That is also to develop persistence layer with ORM benefits. Objects will be used to represent the data. In the JDBC or DAO, data will be represented in the text format, whereas in the ORM, data will be represented in the form of objects format. Next one, Spring WebMVC. WebMVC is used to develop web applications in the Spring framework. By using Spring, I want to create one web application. For that, we are going to use WebMVC module. Security, which is used to implement authentication and authorization functionality for our application. Spring Security. By using Spring Security, we can implement authentication and authorization, which is required for our project. Next one is Spring REST. It is used to develop REST APIs in our application. Spring REST is used to develop the REST APIs in our application. Next one is Spring Data. Spring Data. Spring Data is used to develop the persistence layer only. Spring Data is used to develop the persistence layer only. Here, the persistence layer development got simplified. The persistence layer development got simplified to perform the basic CRUD operations. You no need to write the code also. Data is going to take care of that code. You just need to call the methods of it. You just need to call the methods of it. Are you guys able to follow me? Are you guys able to follow me? Right. Next one, Spring Cloud. What is the purpose of Spring Cloud? What is the purpose of Spring Cloud? What is the purpose of Spring Cloud? Cloud related concepts like a gateway, gateway filter, gateway routing, and Eureka server, service registries, load balancing, all cloud related concepts can be implemented in our project by using this Spring Cloud module. And next one is Spring Batch. What is the purpose of Spring Batch? What is the purpose of Spring Batch? Spring Batch is used to perform bulk operations. Can you tell me one scenario? Can you tell me one scenario for bulk operation? Can you tell me one scenario for bulk operation? Credit card statement generation for all the credit card holders in a bank, sending the salaries to all the employees in a company. Okay. Sending a reminder message for all the students regarding the new batch. That is a bulk operation. Okay. So these kind of bulk operations can be implemented in the project by using Spring Batch. Batch is used to implement batch processing. Batch is used to implement batch processing. Are you guys clear with my point now? Are you guys clear with my point now? Very good. So we are going to start our journey with the Spring framework. So we will start our journey with which module in the Spring? We need to start our journey with the Spring now. We know what is Spring. What are the advantages of the Spring? What are the modules of the Spring? Now we need to start our journey with the Spring. Which module? Spring core module. Now the current version of the Spring framework is 5.x. Spring came into market in the year of 2003. Spring framework released in 2003 as Spring 1.x version. As 1.x version. The current version of the Spring, is 5.x version. The current version of the Spring is 5.x version. The most new feature in the Spring that implemented in the 5.x. Spring 5.x introduced reactive programming. Spring 5.x version introduced reactive programming in the Spring. Introduced reactive programming in the Spring. What is the new concept that added to the Spring recently? That is reactive programming in the Spring framework. In the Spring framework, that is the new concept that is implemented in the Spring 5.x version. Implemented in the 5.x version. Now, see here, Spring framework versions history. What are the versions available? Spring framework version history. Spring framework version history. So it is 1.x released in the March 2004. Sorry, sir, it's not 2003, it is 2004. Spring version history. Spring framework version history. Now, can you see in the 2003 only correct, but in the 2003 that is 0.9. Spring framework released in the 2003 as a 0.9. But first version of the Spring 1.0 released in the 2004, first production release. 2004 is the first production release of the Spring. Production release means people can use. Then 2.0, then 3.0, then 4.0, then 5.0. Are you guys able to see? So when the Spring last version got released in 2017. Now after Spring 4.0, they took almost 4 years for the 5.0. The reason is Spring Boot introduced in the 2014. Spring Boot introduced in the 2014. Note, Spring Boot introduced. Spring Boot released in 2014. Okay. The current version of the Spring Boot is 3.x. Spring Boot 3.x is also came into market. The current version of Spring Boot is 3.x version. Now the current version of the Spring is 5.x version. Spring Boot current version is 3.x version. Are you guys clear with my point? The first version of the Spring released into market in the 2003, first production release. The first production release happened in 2004. The current version of the Spring 5. The current version of the Spring is 5.x version. Spring 5.x version introduced reactive programming in Spring framework. We can say reactive programming in added reactive programming support added in Spring framework 5.x version. That is a new concept that added in the Spring reactive programming. The current version of the Spring is 5.x version released in 2017, almost 5 years back. The latest version of the Spring that we are saying it released 5 years back. Guys, now can you tell me why Spring versions are getting delayed? Can you see the reason? Almost 5 years completed. So can you find out why the Spring releases are getting delayed? Any reason? Any specific reason? They are focusing more on the Spring Boot. They are focusing more on the Spring Boot. They are not focusing on the Spring now. They are focusing more on the Spring Boot. In which year Spring Boot came? Spring 1.x version. Spring 1.x released in the 2014. And what is the current version of the Spring Boot? The current version of the Spring Boot is 3.x version. Note, Spring Boot is the extension for the Spring framework. Spring Boot is an extension for Spring framework. Can I use Spring Boot without Spring? Can I use a Spring Boot without Spring? No. Spring Boot is not a separate framework. Spring Boot is just extension for the Spring. Spring Boot is developed on top of the Spring framework only. Spring Boot is an extension for the Spring framework. Spring Boot is developed on top of Spring framework only. Very good. Thank you guys. So in the tomorrow session, we are going to start with Spring core module. Today it is just introduction for Spring. What is Spring framework? What are the advantages of the Spring? What are the modules available in the Spring? What is the purpose of each module? What is the first version of the Spring? What is the current version of the Spring? What is the first version of the boot? What is the current version of the boot? Those concepts we have discussed. Thank you for joining here. So we are going to start with the Spring core in the tomorrow session. Now, if anybody having questions, so please raise your hand in the Zoom. Reactive programming that we will discuss in the coming classes. So what is the reactive programming? The programming is going to work based on some events. So we'll discuss that reactive programming also in the coming classes.